what I don't think we've really done an adequate job of is really thinking about, is there a theology of business? Like, is there a purpose for business? And so really, I've found the younger generation really resonating with that. Now, I think there's some other areas and, maybe some disciplines that would be helpful to them.
How do I communicate to people the good news today, especially young people, that Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one finds a happy and fulfilling life except coming to the Father. I actually can tell people when they ask me what I do for a living, I can tell them, like Jesus, I've been in manufacturing most of my life. And that's what he did before he went into public ministry.
Could be right. That someone who's really young like me and inexperienced compared to Raymond, who's really kind of archaic and fossilized, I could actually be discipling Raymond. Did I say that in a bad way?
Hello everyone, Dennis Allen with the Disciple Dilemma along with Raymond Monroe. Here's your biblical trivia question. Can you make a case that a real estate developer can be a disciple? Think about that. We're going to have David Atchison on today, who is a real estate developer and a disciple. And he's founded a ministry called Higher Call. Higher Call is all about being in the workplace as a disciple, serving Christ the way disciples are supposed to serve Christ. It's a fascinating journey for a man who has been very successful in his business career and struggled with the tension between being a servant of Christ and actually being in the business place. How do you do that practically? That's what the conversation is about today. Raymond and I are going to unpack some really great information with David Atchison. Higher Call. He's got a book. He's got a ministry. Come check it out. Here we go.
Well, David Atchison, we are so grateful you joined us on the Disciple Dilemma. Thanks for being with us.
It's good to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to visit with you guys today.
So we got three business guys on the call today. This is great. The podcast will line up. And I think I just tossed the first question at Ray. So I'm thinking about kind of the state of the universe right now, but to localize it, what are the executives in the business world worried about? And I'll lead this back toward our conversation quickly, but Ray, what's kind of the stuff that's bugging, keeping people awake nights these days in your industry?
We have had 40 years of public policy that has made capital-intensive industries persistently not profitable. All of the things that we want in a modern society, if there was an externality like climate or healthcare, we thought we could load that on manufacturing and that they could become efficient enough to pay for that and still be profitable enough to reinvest. And as long as we were a regional business, so everybody had all those costs, it worked okay. But for 40 years, we've had such a problematic public policy. We haven't had the profitability to reinvest and innovate. And now we're in a situation where we don't have enough capacity or workforce to maintain our economic and national security. So I'm working with the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy on the infrastructure challenges of the large steel components they need. So the two things we're worried about is, number one, a business environment where we can be profitable. But more than that, our big challenge goes right to the heart of discipleship, which is, how do I find the young people in the next generation that are willing to do the work? And we have told everyone that they need to go find their passion in life and do something that makes themselves happy, instead of teaching them to serve other people and be part of a community. How do I communicate to people the good news today, especially young people, that Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one finds a happy and fulfilling life except coming to the Father through me. So that's really what I see as a challenge. And it goes right to the heart of the church failing to teach young people that discipleship means loving my neighbor.
So in a way, you're setting up kind of a conversation for us today where we're going to hear that our ability to inspire young people to join the workforce closely mirrors or echoes our ability to inspire young people to follow Christ fully as a bondservant, along with the fact that you're facing challenges in your industries with capital structure, which is depleted, interest rates, which are high, government policy, which is oppressive, death by 1,000 cuts on fees and environmental issues, those sorts of things. Am I catching the drift?
You got it exactly. I'm actually speaking to a conference this next week in DC, and I've got a calculation that doing business in the United States, when you manufacture basic materials, you have 25 to 40% higher costs than anybody else in the rest of the world.
Wow. Okay. So let's swing around from a dark-hearted industrialist and let's to a commercial real estate developer. David Atchison, you're in the world of people who need building materials, people who have to borrow a lot of money to make things happen, consumer sentiment. What's going on in your neck of the woods? What are people thinking about there?
Oh, I tell you what, I love it because there's a lot of chaos and there's a lot of change and people are trying to figure things out. Yeah, I resonate completely with all the things that Ray just mentioned. Obviously we're in a very capital intensive business and there's just a lot of pressure to, the margins are tougher than they haven't been in the past. The cost of construction has just exponentially gone off the charts. And so I can talk about all of the kind of the challenges, but I tend to be a very optimistic person and I see so many good things happening. We talk about the importance of young, trying to affect this younger generation. I think there's 68 million Gen Zers right now, that whole generation, and they're going to be our leaders, in 10 years. They're going to be running our companies in the next 10 or 15 years. And so I'm looking at that generation and seeing tremendous opportunity, certainly challenges, but tremendous opportunity to try to influence them. But, for me, I think there's still a lot of opportunities, but I think in our business in particular with commercial real estate, whichever asset class you want to speak of. And by the way, Ray, I'd love to get more manufacturing back here. And we have made some huge strategic errors, I think, in not accommodating that. But what I see in the commercial real estate world is people are having to be a lot more thoughtful, a lot more creative about how they use the resources given to them. And I'm kind of on a new drive right now, trying to see how we can really help private, public, and even nonprofit entities come together to partner to actually create really great things for their communities. So.
Well, David, as I think about the things that you've just said, folks will know already because they can see up on the screen a book called Reflections on a Higher Call. And then we've got this organization called Higher Call. Thought you were in commercial real estate. What are you doing there?
That's a loaded question, I'll tell you. So years ago, I would say
you should be shocked that Dennis asked you a loaded question. You should be just unbelievable, right?
So basically, what you're saying is I need to ramp up because they're coming my way. I like it. So I would say years ago, as a young businessman, trying to make my way in the world, and I was really blessed in a lot of ways at the time, and I met a lot of different people. One of the big things that just jumped out at me is that there just seemed to be I was certainly far from perfect in any way. I'm just a follower of Christ, but I was serious about it. I was really committed to growing. It's the most, Jesus is the most important thing in my life. And so, but I love business. I felt like I was called to business. And so what I found is that there's this real big gap where I heard somebody use a phrase one time and then I've heard it, 100 times since. And they said this, they said, well, business is business. And that's just unacceptable to me. Yeah, business is business, but that doesn't give you an excuse to live a different way. And so what I would see is that there was this huge gap between, a person's faith life and then their work life, between their professional life and their spiritual life. And so Higher Call was really born out of a burning desire to want to try to make connections that are biblically based, that are discipleship oriented, these connections between really faith and business. So that's really where it all came out of, that drive.
So I'm looking at your work now in Higher Call, and folks, you can see the website as we'll chat along today through the podcast for Higher Call. What are you hearing from the Gen Zers you just mentioned and from the millennials saying, look, these are our challenges in the workplace versus boomers like us when we were plowing our way through the workforce? What's confronting people out there today?
Well, I think you could take any generation, and we've got our strengths and we've got our weaknesses. And I think that's true in my generation and in every other generation. I think somebody said it's the first time in history that there's actually 5 generations represented in the marketplace. And that's kind of fascinating in and of itself. But what I'm seeing, particularly, I spend a lot of time and focus on young leaders and trying to pour into young leaders. And I think that there is a much higher awareness today of really wanting to do purposeful things. They want their if they're in a business, if they're in a profession, they want it to count. They want it to make a difference. And if they're a follower of Christ, they're certainly wanting to make it a kingdom thing. And so which is great, but what I've tried to do and what I'm seeing, it's kind of caused me to go back. And so I think over the last 15 years, we've done a pretty good job of helping people theologically think about their faith in their work life. But what I don't think we've really done an adequate job of is really thinking about, is there a theology of business? Like, is there a purpose for business? And so really, I've found the younger generation really resonating with that. Now, I think there's some other areas and, maybe some disciplines that would be helpful to them. But I think really getting this thing right, God created all of these incredible resources. Ray, you work with steel, and you got to kind of go back to figure out, where did that come from? I'm using one of God's original resources, land. And so I've been rediscovering a purpose in business itself. And of course, I believe we have a universal calling to go make disciples. That is the call. I mean, Jesus, commissioned us before he left this earth. But at the same time, if we can understand that our business actually has a purpose, and it's not just to make money so I can give to ministry of the church, I think that's really fundamentally foundational.
I actually can tell people when they ask me what I do for a living, I can tell them, like Jesus, I've been in manufacturing most of my life. And that's what he did before he went into public ministry.
Yeah, and our work life is actually a perfect context for discipleship, because if we think about it, what happens at work? What happens in your business? I mean, all of those flesh patterns, our selfishness, our greed, our insecurity, our anger, the curse of comparison, all those things come out. And so what a perfect place that God has created for us to actually help each other grow in Christ than the business place.
So Dennis, you don't get to go off here. You used to turn businesses around. What have we failed to do as real estate developers and manufacturers that would really make our businesses more Christ-like?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Ray. Dave, we have a kind of an ongoing feud on this podcast. Ray keeps on trying to lean into agency and mechanism, and I keep trying to lean into mission when we talk about discipleship. So my whole idea is that I like the idea of community. I like the idea of loving each other. I like the idea of actually taking my ethos into the workplace. But I'm back to this idea that the number one missing thing, I think, in the church, and this is intended to be a little bit of a scrimmage for all of us, but I think the number one thing missing in the church is the one-on-one, maybe one-on-two, deep, intimate, full, clear, transparent relationship of one with another. It normally is, this is an older person with a slightly younger person or a much younger person, but it doesn't have to be. It could be that someone who's really young like me and inexperienced compared to Raymond, who's really kind of archaic and fossilized, I could actually be discipling Raymond. Did I say that in a bad way? I'm trying to.
No, 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 no.
I feel like I just walked into the middle of something. So this is very entertaining. Y'all go ahead.
But the idea, I think, that has been lost substantially inside the church of that one-on-one developing lives has permeated our society. So I'm going to go as far as to say, and this is where the heresy kicks in for me probably, I don't think statesmanship is possible in America until we get discipleship going right again inside the church. I don't think there's a social model inside the American civic system, absent the disciples moving through life saying, look, my life is not my own. I am here to better my society, better my people, better my work, better the kind of things that I do with my skills, talents, and even my foibles to go forward. So I'm just going to toss this melange of stuff back over, this morass of thinking back over, and I'm sure Raymond can untangle it in just a sentence or two.
So hold on to the edge of your chair, Dennis. It'll be shocking. I agree with you completely. I fundamentally agree with you. Yes, you can take your temperature and all that. Yeah.
Somebody get Dennis some help quick.
Yeah, when you talk about community, I think discipleship is peer-to-peer loving relationships that develop over a lifetime. So to me, the most important discipleship meeting is the lunch you have with 4 friends you've had forever, and you talk about where you are with Christ. And I believe that we have failed some of the next generation by telling them they're supposed to find their own satisfaction instead of find friends they can work together with throughout their entire life to really advance the kingdom of God.
Well, we can't stand around here agreeing with each other. Let's toss it over to David and see if he'll blow something.
The problem is you guys are speaking my love language here. I absolutely 100% agree. This has been a lot of what I've tried to promote, because I've found what a difference it's made in my own life. And, you know, one of the things that I do think is, and again, I'll bring back the workplace just to make this one point. There's something special that happens when people get together and around their faith and their work and their business. We get around together each other with our faith, you know, at church. We do that in networking stuff in business. But when you get 2 or 3, or sometimes, you know, maybe 4 people that kind of share some commonality, something really special happens. I do this. I meet with 3 other guys, and then we're in the same kind of business. And so when we get together to have lunch, we never know where it's going to go. It might be some deeply spiritual conversation, or it might turn into more of a business thing. But one way or the other, iron's being sharpened iron, and we are growing in our faith, and we're seeing God at work in our lives, and we're walking through life together.
The way we have constructed childhood now and in an institutional environment, people don't know how to make friends, how to have friends. How has your program really been able to reach down into those younger generations and create an environment or create a path for young people to build those deep friendships and relationships within the faith?
That's a great question. I don't know if we've, you know, figured anything out, but I do know that we have to put people in places where they are sitting, you know, next to somebody else that they can relate to. If nothing else, they understand what they do every day, and they might have some kind of a business connection. So one of the things that we've done is we've created these gatherings at trade associations. So in real estate, ICSC, big conference, and, you know, they've got something going on every month. It's a huge trade association for commercial real estate. And so what happens is we do these breakfast events, and we'll have somebody, you know, speak, or we'll have a panel discussion, but always, every time we plan for conversation to happen around the table. And there's a facilitator. It's very well thought out and planned. There's questions. And what we found is really, really sort of, it has to be God because I'm not that smart. And that is some lifelong friendships have come by sitting at the table with another person. There was a guy who was with a retailer in California, and he sat down with this broker from Texas, and they started sharing about their faith and their business. And the next thing you know, they're lifelong friends. And so we have to give people opportunities to actually do that instead of entertaining them all the time.
When you're in a business luncheon and you sit down at a table, God in his providence, before the foundation of the world, decided who was going to sit next to you. And he has a plan for that conversation. So you need to recognize that this is not an accident, that this particular person is next to me. And so you have to try and figure out, why did God put them there? And what can I do to serve them and help them? And what do I need in terms of understanding from them? It's really, once you have that insight, it really changes the way you think about those informal encounters.
I think to that point, one of my favorite, I'm a big fan of Daniel. He lived in Babylon. We go to work every day in Babylon. And, he had these friends, there was Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And I just think that friendship was so important. We see evidence of it in chapter 2 when they're all going to get killed, and they got together at Daniel's house and they had a prayer meeting that night, the 4 of them. It's beautiful to see that. And so you see how friendships in the scriptures were given literally save people's lives. I mean, they literally kept them moving forward in their faith. And so, yeah, relationships are the heart of it.
So, David, I'm looking at your book, and I just want to know, first of all, do you take full responsibility for everything that's on the back of the book jacket?
It's been so long since I looked at the back of the book jacket. No, I don't take any responsibility for that at all.
That's an honest answer. I like an author who disclaims the back of the book jacket. You never have any control of that stuff anyway, right? They just take it away from you and write what they want.
Exactly.
Well, that's too bad, because on the back, it makes a promise to me, if I'm going to buy the book, where it says that you're going to unload some of your experience and wisdom about the time that you spend in the marketplace. So I was curious, maybe you could just make something up for us, but what's a couple of the things that you would say to some millennials and some Gen Zs that are staring at you and going like, okay, you've been in our neck of the woods now all your life. We're a believer, you're a believer. Here's the world, the commercial world that we're in. What can you tell me? Give us a hint or two about what we would take away from David Atchison on the hire call.
Yeah, that's what I would call a loaded question, because y'all don't have the time for me to go through all that probably. But here's a couple of things I guess that come to mind, and that is just something that I think Ray alluded to a minute ago. I mean, that the providence of God is just amazing. The sovereignty of God is unfathomable, and the way that he has you where you are right now in your professional life as well as your spiritual life, and your where you live and where you grow up and what family you're in. You're there, and God has a plan for you. And so, alert yourself, awaken yourself, and see how God is at work. He is actually at work in your work. And that is just, super foundational. I think that the other thing I would say, it's important. I kind of feel like there's a growing gap right now in our culture between the genuine Christ followers and then what I would call cultural Christianity. I think that gap is growing. I almost feel like cultural Christianity is almost going away in some areas. And so just, don't be afraid to be who God called you to be. And God actually cares about what you're doing 9 to 5 or whatever your work hours are. And probably if it's Gen Z or millennial, they don't have those work hours. It's more spread out than that. But and another thing is, I think it's important not to. We should not presume on people's doctrine. I think people feel like when you grow up, everybody knows certain things. Well, I don't think we can assume that anymore. I think we really need to be thoughtful about the things that we are teaching and expressing um, that come from the scriptures that we're sharing that are very intensely relevant to our daily living and daily life in the workplace. So, yeah, I think that I love. There's a verse in Daniel 11:32 that says the last part of the verse just sort of captures the thought, and that is the people who know their God will display strength and take action. And I think that every Gen Z and millennial want to be the person who knows their God and is able to act on it and have initiative. And so to do that, we have to know God. We have to be in his word. We have to walk with other people who are pursuing God. Um, One of the things that Paul said to Timothy, he said, pursue all these things, but he said, along with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. And so we need to find people who are just authentically wanting to pursue Christ. And we need to align our lives with them and chase after what Jesus has created for us.
David, folks are listening to this podcast and they're saying, okay, I need to creep this guy's rap sheet. I need to learn a little bit more about what's going on with David. Where do we go to hunt down what you're up to?
Our website is highercallministries.org. And there's information there. There's some resources there. I write a what we call a reflection on a higher call. I try to do that weekly or just about every other week. And you can find that there. We have other content. We do conferences. And so some of that content's, you can find that there. But one of the things that I'm a big believer in is letting things happen organically. And so, first of all, higher call, I run a full-time business. I have a company. And so people go, how do you do both things? And I years ago thought that God was leading me to this place where I have to choose one or the other. And in fact, I got on the plane from Nashville, flew to Orlando to meet with Pat Morley, who wrote the book Man in the Mirror. I don't know if you remember Pat.
Yeah.
I had him speak at one of our events. And I went down and talked to Pat, like, okay, Pat, what do I do? Like, the ministry's exciting. The business is growing. What should I do? And I lay this thing out for 20 minutes and he just looks at me and said, what's the problem? I go, are you not listening to me? I can't, how do I do both of them? And what I came away with is I thought that there was supposed to be a decision. I've got to choose one. And what the Lord showed me, no, you need to live in attention. And you need to, because as soon as, Pat helped me understand, as soon as you step away from the workplace, the marketplace, you don't have that platform anymore in the same way. And so I've always held on to that. And so, I think what I would say is if people can, the website, there's a lot of good things there, but we have kind of created this network where people start things, where people are, I've got a guy started a Bible study in Atlanta. We've got this national prayer call that happens 30 minutes a month by a group of people. Actually, it started in Florida, and people pray for 30 minutes, one time every month. There's things going on. So hopefully the website can point you to those things. We did this thing called higher call huddles. I'm going back to your comment because Dennis, what you said about that relationship, those small group of people, 2 or 3 people, is so meaningful to me and has literally been charted the course of my life. It changed the trajectory of my life, to be honest. And so we start this thing called higher call huddles. And basically we kind of, it's on the website. It's a page of description. Anybody can do it. And it doesn't have to be called higher call huddles, by the way. But the idea of getting together with somebody who kind of understands your world, just go to lunch, go to breakfast, have coffee, and just talk to them about your struggles. Talk to them about the things that you're passionate about, the things that you're wrestling with, and then let them share. And something special happens. I almost want to use the word magical, but that doesn't sound very spiritual, but it really is amazing what God does. It's beautiful. And so I go back to what you said, Dennis, and I just would encourage people to But sometimes if we just say, okay, I'm going to do that with my church friends over here, we're missing something if we can't connect the dots between our faith and our work. So that's what I would say.
David Atchison, who is both a commercial real estate developer as well as the founder of Higher Call Ministries. Thanks for being with us on the Disciple Dilemma.
Thanks, guys. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the banter back and forth. I could do that all day.
David, you've been great. I really appreciate your insights and really liked how you summed up the fact that when you're in business, it also gives you a perspective of what your ministry has to be about.
Would you help the church think more about discipleship? Would you help us get the conversation started to talk about the biblical discipleship Jesus gave us? Please follow us. Our website, www.thediscipleddilemma.com. You can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and all the RSS feeds. If you'd follow or like us, you'll help us get leverage in the digital marketplace to talk about the fact that discipleship needs to be talked about. And as always, folks, thanks for listening.